What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and on the line with me right now, a man who correctly predicted the Super Bowl champions that hail from the state of, Kansas, Missouri, Idaho? I'm not quite sure, but Ben McDonald, ladies and gentlemen. Ben, where do the Chiefs play?
I just want to congratulate the great state of Nebraska for a wonderful Super Bowl victory. Really proud of the Chiefs. Big game for them. Just wonderful stuff, Jason. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here. I know that you hail from the great state of Alaska, so it's very diverse on our show. But in all
Now,
seriousness,
for those of you who didn't get the joke, when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl the other night, Donald Trump tweeted that they were from the great state of Kansas, even though they play in Missouri. And look, it's an honest mistake, I think, because they pretty much play on the border of Kansas and Missouri, but still, that's just hilarious. So, I'll give you credit, Ben, because usually I come up with the opening line jokes every week, and this was you. You fed it to me, and I dunked it. So thank you for the alley-oop attempt here as we start our podcast this evening.
And what a segue, because I think something we're going to be seeing a lot of when we have the All-Star game, Jason, are some nice little alley-oops. Not too much defense, but lots of highlights, lots of dunks. And I think it's a natural progression for us to go over our All-Star selections and see who we got for snubs, how we did, and kind of just review the rosters, because I know we made our predictions last week. So where do you want to start with this, Jason? I mean, what jumped out at you?
How accurate you were. I mean, you called that Sabonis selection. I was very impressed. I mean, a lot of outlets had Sabonis in as an Eastern Conference reserve. I didn't see it based on Indiana being such a small market, but he's in there, rightfully so. I was very impressed with your Chris Paul pick. I think I went a little too biased on my picks, even though my toughest omissions both got in. So in the East, you were 6 out of 7. I was 4 out of 7. And you were also 6 out of 7 in the West, where I was also 6 out of 7. So I think, much to your surprise, Russell Westbrook made it along with Chris Paul. So lots of point guards in the West to be eligible for the draft, which is coming up later this week. But all in all, I think the NBA did get this right. You're just a wizard, man.
Yeah, I mean, the ones I quibble with a little bit is I think I would have had Devin Booker over Russell Westbrook. I mean, this is kind of picking nits. I don't think either one of them is dramatically better, but Westbrook's having one of his worst seasons of his career, really, right now. When you look at the overall numbers, he's had some pretty good counting numbers for the Rockets, but it's pretty remarkable watching them as a team and the way that they play, because teams just kind of dare him to shoot, and he's shooting pretty terribly. While I think Booker has been far and away the best player on a Phoenix team that hasn't been bad. So I kind of thought he deserved the nod, but I'm not going to quibble over that. I think the one that I really struggled with was the omission of Bradley Beal on the Eastern Conference All-Stars, and we both had him as a lock. We thought it was pretty much a guarantee that he would get in, and I had kind of thought that it would be Kyle Lowry who got bumped. I had a feeling that was probably how it was going to go, and he ends up getting on. Tatum gets on, who I believe you picked, and he doesn't make it. I mean, do you think that Bradley Beal and Booker, who both came out afterwards and had some critiques of the game, do you think they have a point? I mean, should they have been on the rosters?
See, that's the problem with having only 12 spots in each conference. There are so many superstars in today's game that there's just not enough room for all of these players. I mean, in another world, Devin Booker would be a multi-time All-Star already with the numbers he puts up, but he plays on a bad Phoenix team. Ditto for Bradley Beal in Washington. I mean, if the Wizards were in the playoff picture, I think he would have warranted a bit more consideration. And then my other big snub is Karl-Anthony Towns. So I think the NBA just went for, the coaches went for, guys on playoff teams, whether it's Kyle Lowry in Toronto, giving them 2 All-Stars along with Siakam. Ditto for Middleton. The Bucks have the best record in the league, so they have to have 2 All-Stars. And Giannis was even upset that Bledsoe didn't really receive too much consideration. So I think the 3 biggest snubs were Booker and Beal and Towns, 2 in the West, 1 in the East. I know I picked our guys, Spencer Dinwiddie and Zach LaVine, to be reserves. And I think if this was a month ago, I would have had a little bit more of a case. But, they've both slipped recently. They're not putting up as big of numbers. And it shows. So I think the NBA did get it right. It's tough not seeing Paul George in there as well. Give him an honorary mention. But all in all, it's going to be a pretty exciting All-Star game. And then this time next week, we'll know who's playing on Team LeBron and who's playing on Team Giannis. I want to correct something I said last week. I said Luka was one of the captains. I thought he received more votes than LeBron for some strange reason, but I stand corrected. Team LeBron versus Team Giannis, and it should be a good game.
Yeah, and Team Gianna versus Team Kobe. We talked a lot last week, and they kind of took the suggestions that we made. We had said, I think, 8-24. They ended up going 2-24, which is actually, I think, even a nicer touch to give Gianna a little love. So I kind of like that. And LeBron, winning browning points left and right in Lake Town here by choosing Gianna. I think he's played it beautifully. I think the NBA has done a wonderful job with the way that they've handled this. And, I think the most remarkable thing, Jason, and we don't even have this in the show notes, but it's just something that occurred to me just while we're talking, is can you remember the last time there was a news story this big and the organization who was handling the kind of the PR for it just got nothing but good press? I mean, this is unheard of. The NBA has handled this so well that I feel like there has been absolutely no criticism whatsoever because Adam Silver's done such a good job that there's almost nowhere for people to criticize. And hats off to the NBA for handling such a tragic thing so well, I think.
No, absolutely. And, watching the tribute on Friday night last week where LeBron kind of threw the speech out, spoke from the heart, I thought that was really well done as well. But getting back to the All-Star game, we're going to have another show drop this week where we kind of preview the new format, which Ben and I are both big fans of, and we'll kind of get into our favorite All-Star memories. So that'll come later this week after the main show that we're doing right now. But Ben, do you have anything else on All-Star before we move forward here?
No, at the end of the day, I can't really have too big of a gripe with the way the rosters were picked. I think I would have gone Beal over Tatum. That's probably the one that I feel the most strongly about. I think if you're Danny Ainge, you would probably trade Jason Tatum for Bradley Beal right now. To be honest, and I think Beal has had a better season. But again, it's kind of splitting hairs here. It's so close. So congratulations to all those guys. We talked about it. All the first-time All-Stars.
Congratulations to the 9 first-time All-Stars. Yeah, I took the words right out of your mouth. We have Doncic, Young, Siakam, Mitchell, Gobert, Ingram, Adebayo, Tatum, Sabonis. 9 out of 24. And I think only 2 All-Stars are really old men on this team is Chris Paul and LeBron James. So it's an infusion of youth. As I said last week, 9 first-timers on the big stage. And, if you're Trae Young, who had another ankle injury in the last week, he's got a busy All-Star weekend between the three-point shootout, the Rising Stars Challenge, and the All-Star game. The Hawks can't be too happy about that, even though they're out of it this year. But it's a nice chance for him to kind of showcase nationally and maybe entice some players to come down to the Peach State and play with him.
Yeah, and we have some talk about that in just a bit. But let's start, Jason, in the Big Apple. Forget the peaches. It's time for apples because the Knicks. Oh man, Jason, the Knicks. I don't know the last time we had a good Knicks story, and this isn't one of them. Steve Mills is out, Jason. What do you make of Steve Mills departing the Knicks? It seems like he's only been there a little while, but he has been there since, 2013?
Yeah, he's one of James Dolan's most trusted advisors, and I think he'll end up taking on a role in another one of Dolan's companies. I read something like that earlier today, but this move was a long time coming. The Knicks have been a dumpster fire. Even when they tried to pseudo-contend, it backfired. They brought in Scott Perry alongside Mills to try and make this work, a bit of a two-headed monster tasked with rebuilding a team in the NBA's biggest market, and it failed miserably because Steve Mills has been with the Knicks in the president of basketball operations role since 2013, which ironically was the last time that the Knicks were in the playoffs and won a series. But since then, they are 178 and 365 with Steve Mills serving as the president of basketball operations. Guess what, Ben? That's good for the worst record in the NBA. So I think it was a smart move. I don't know about the timing with the trade deadline being in less than 48 hours, but Mills had to go. Perry's kind of stepping in that interim role, but I think they need to find someone that's a little bit more versed in today's NBA, maybe someone that has influence with agents or players, kind of like a Rob Pelinka with the Lakers. That's worked wonders for them. So I think the Knicks are beyond rock bottom right now. And look, I think the biggest thing that everyone's calling for is for Dolan to sell a team. I mean, just last week, he called out a high school kid that yelled at him to sell the team and got him kicked out of the Garden, and then talked to his mother the next day. I mean, come on, man. This guy is just a joke of an NBA owner. But since he won't sell the team, I think he needs to let his next hire and all basketball people in the organization do their jobs without breathing over their shoulders like Brainy and Hey Arnold. Do you remember that Nickelodeon show?
I
When
remember
the guy
Hey
with the
Arnold.
glasses was mouth breathing all over Helga. That's what I feel like James Dolan is doing for this organization. And they're not going to win unless he brings guys in and let them do their job. I mean, that's the most important thing. But Mills really didn't leave too much of a legacy. Up until the day before he was fired, he was working the phones trying to get D'Angelo Russell, which I think was falling on deaf ears. Bob Myers probably like, incoming call from Steve Mills. I'm not going to take this today, D'Angelo. You're not going to New York. Don't worry. We took you out of Brooklyn. We're not going. Yeah, like we got the Splash Brothers coming back next year. Like we don't want you going to the Garden. That's where careers go to die. Like we don't want that.
I don't think anything you said is hyperbolic at all. The thing that's funny is just like some of the things that when you talk about the Knicks, you say these things that are so obvious, and yet they can't figure it out. You're like, maybe get someone who knows basketball a bit and is versed in today's game. Like, I think every other franchise in the NBA is aware that that's a necessity. And the Knicks say, yeah, I think Phil Jackson. Let's go Phil Jackson. Let's call him up in his ranch in Montana. How could this backfire? And then somehow they just manage to mess up pretty much everything. I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, you talk about how the draft is kind of a dart throw. It's about getting lucky. The thing with the Knicks that I find so interesting is that even when they get a good dart throw, they manage to mess it up. I mean, Porzingis, they basically got rid of for expiring contracts, and Dennis Smith Jr., who last time I checked is doing nothing for them. So it's just this like comedy of errors for them. And I mean, it's kind of remarkable because it's hard, even if you're a Knicks fan, how do you contest anything that Jason just said? I don't think you can. It's a disaster. The Knicks are, as you said, Jason, an absolute dumpster fire. And it starts at the top. It starts with Dolan. I mean, it gets to the point where you start to wonder if there's something more, just because could he really ruin a team so completely? But it's a joke. And this is a franchise that needs to get back to some level of respectability before anyone's going to go there, because no one wants to be any part of that team and any part of that circus that it's become, because there's nothing good coming out of there, and they haven't demonstrated any ability to develop talent, to find it, or to bring it in via free agency, quite frankly. I mean, this is supposed to be the huge market that can bring in stars. Amari Stoudemire was not the top tier star when he came, and they didn't get anyone this year. I mean, Julius Randle does not count as a major free agent addition. So it's just got to be hugely disappointing for Knicks fans to see Steve Mills go, not because he's a great executive, but because it is another acknowledgement of the failure of the franchise and another acknowledgement that it's time to start over again, which has already happened. It feels like multiple times in the last 5 years, which is just, it's incredible. I mean, it's an incredible thing for what used to be a bit of a marquee franchise that's now just really, really struggling. And across the borough, you have the Nets, who, next year, the Knicks are going to face some real competition in New York. With Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving playing in Brooklyn, people are going to watch those games. This year, the Nets have struggled. I mean, we've talked about it, but when there's a real team in that borough, people are going to go see those games if it's Marcus Morris show in the Garden. I mean, it's just something that is inevitable.
Well, and most Knicks fans I've talked to since the firing, they have one name in mind that they want to come in and save their franchise, and that's Masai Ujiri, who is well paid and under contract with the Toronto Raptors. So I think if they want to pry him away from the North, they're going to have to attach some serious draft pick compensation for Ujiri to come in. Now, I think that's the textbook answer. Who should Dolan bring in? Ujiri. Look what he did for the Raptors. He made a bullshit deal for Kawhi Leonard, got the franchise its first title, and they're